I think for any change to stick, your heart has to believe you. It has to believe that you're making these changes for more than just superficial reasons or because you think it's what other people expect you to do. I'm not saying you can't benefit from simply decluttering your countertops, but for it to be a permanent, long-lasting change, especially when we're talking about things like not bringing more things into the house, stop shopping, that kind of thing, those are big changes for people. That has to be inside-out stuff.
That's Courtney Carver. You might recognize her from a little documentary that was released in 2016 called Minimalism. That's right. That was my documentary. I made it. It was amazing to be able to catch up with her. You might also recognize her from her books, from her blog posts. She's got a great blog called Be More With Less, or maybe you've even participated in one of her minimalist challenges. Apart from her blog, she's probably most known for Project 333 or Project 333. I'm not exactly sure which one it is. I've heard people say it both ways. Probably should have asked her when she was here. But anyway, it's this challenge. She challenges you to wear 33 items for 3 months. And that includes jewelry, that includes shoes, and includes everything else that you would otherwise put on your body. And it is challenging, but it's swept across the world. There's been so many people that have gotten value out of it. It's helped people think about their lives in a different way and the things that they consume, primarily what's in their closet. So yeah, like I said, it was great to catch up with Courtney. This is the first time that I got to link up with her since the film. And we talk about the influence of advertising. We talk about turning your blog into a business and the myth of job security. Today, we also answer a couple of the first ever audience questions. You've been sending your questions in over the past couple months, and it's been amazing to hear from you and hear about the specific things that you're going through. So we got to 2 of those today. If you have a question for the podcast, if you have a question for me or one of my guests, send them in to hello@mattdiavella.com. I would love it to be a video. That's my preference because this podcast is pretty heavy on the video side of things. So if you could do that, it'd be great. If you're camera shy, totally cool. I'll take audio. And feel free to get specific about the things you're going through, the problems that you have. Say if you are a hip hop producer and you have a song or a beat that you want to send us that you want to get feedback on. I may not be the expert there, but I will find somebody, a producer. Next time I have an artist on, we'll talk about it. So I think that would help us to dig even deeper here and try to get to the bottom of what it means to make meaningful content these days. So that's, again, hello@mattdiavella.com, and I look forward to hearing from you. Now, without further ado, God, I told myself I would stop starting the podcast by saying, without further ado. It just seems so corny. Like, who says without further ado? I guess I do. Without further ado, this is Courtney Carver. You're listening to The Ground Up Show, a podcast that inspires creatives to make meaningful content and pursue their passions. My name's Matt Diavella, and I'm a filmmaker best known for the Netflix documentary Minimalism. And I'm sitting down with creators to talk about their process, the lessons they've learned, and how to make an impact. Want to start the podcast?
Let's do it.
Courtney, welcome to The Ground Up Show.
Thanks, Matt.
How's it going?
Very good. It's so great to see you again.
I know. The last time I saw you was the interview for Minimalism, I believe. We haven't seen each other since then, right?
Yeah, in Salt Lake City.
Right. So what's been going on? What's the latest in your life over the past, what was that, 3 years ago? Was that 2.5 years ago when we shot it?
It was a while ago, for sure. A lot has changed. The most recent thing is my new book that's out. I'm here in LA on book tour, and I'm so glad that we got to see each other while I was here.
I know, I'm excited. It's funny because I spend so much time working on these interviews, just like going back and forth. I probably saw your interview about 100 times, just kind of picking it apart and trying to find the right places to fit it into the film. But yeah, it's definitely great to get back in touch. How long have you been working on this book for? You've done a couple books before, but is this your first major publisher type deal?
Yeah, so I have done some self-publishing. This is my first print book and my first traditionally published book.
And what's like the difference there? Like the self-published is obviously very common. A lot of people do it. I think it's probably harder to get a book deal, to get somebody to, what do they give you like an advance, or they say they give you the distribution and all that goes along with it?
Yeah, there are a lot of differences. The ebooks are fantastic and the self-publishing because you can just do it. You can write it and put it out there and be done with it on your time. And then when you're working with an agent and a publisher, you're working on other people's time. So it takes a couple of years versus a couple of months. I think that's probably the biggest difference. But then you have some additional support that you might not have when you're going it on your own.
Right. So do they like give you an editor and other people to like help out with the actual creation of the book?
So not so much with the creation. Like I wrote the book after doing a proposal and kind of getting some feedback, but then they come in and they help you make it better. So they make your writing better.
I think that's probably like one of those challenging aspects of being creative and giving up control, and especially when you're partnering with somebody else. And I know from Minimalism, if it was just my venture, just me by myself, the film would have looked a lot different. Probably wouldn't have been as good, but you have to be able to take in other people's feedback and be like, okay, actually, yeah, you're right. Do you get like attached to the writing and the things that you make, or do you give up that, I guess, final creative say a little bit easier?
I don't get that attached. I mean, I might be attached to some of the stories within the book, but thinking about the project as a whole, I was really excited to have that feedback because I had been writing it by myself for a year. So I was kind of in this bubble, and I was really looking forward to some outside input. And I can only think of, there was one chapter in the book that they wanted to cut, and there was one story within that chapter that I really loved. So I just suggested that we put it somewhere else, and they were up for that. So it worked out very
Compromise.
well. Yes.
I feel like that's what those kind of things where you have to be able to get creative, and you have to think of other solutions to problems. And a lot of times, the one piece of advice that I've heard before is if everybody, like if you keep hearing people be like, I don't really like that scene, I don't really like that scene, I don't think that should be in there, but then one person says, that's my favorite scene, like that was like really like changed my perspective, then you obviously it's not cut and dry, black and white, but I think it's pretty good. You should keep that in there, because a lot of times it's hard to tell from the outside, and when you're a creator, what's good and what's not, what's going to work, what's going to connect with people, and what won't.
Right, what resonates. And it's been interesting now that the book is out, and of course I can't change anything, to hear from other people what's really grabbing them is different than what grabbed me in some cases. So I try not to, like, I'm very grateful for the feedback, but I try not to take it in, because at this point, the book is out. It's finished.
I once asked somebody for advice. This was on minimalism. And I said, because I reached out to a bunch of people and said, hey, we'd love to give your feedback on this cut. What do you think? Any and all advice would be helpful. And then it took them 2 months to get back. And by that time, I had already finished the film. We had sent it to distribution. Like, everything was ready to go. And then it was a long email. They put a lot of time and energy into it. But I'm like, I'm so sorry, but I didn't tell them. I actually lied. I hope they're not listening. But I was like, oh, thank you so much for your feedback. I really appreciate it. This is really great. But then I didn't read it because I was like, oh, man, at this point, it doesn't matter. At this point, if I even read it, it's just going to, and they're right, it's just going to hurt. I'm like, all right, I just need to kind of push this to the side. So I see that. I think that for me is a little bit easier, is just to kind of, once you're done with it, the feedback is the feedback. It's like, there's nothing you can do about it.
Right. And it has very little to do with me, and so much more to do with the lens of whomever is giving the feedback.
Sure. So you've written a lot about minimalism and simplicity. What makes this book a little bit different? Why did you feel pushed to write this book?
What makes this book different than a lot of the other things I've written about simplicity is that it's more about the inside changes versus the outside changes. So while, yes, I talk a little bit about decluttering, it's so much more than that. It's about the changes that I made from the inside out, the changes that I made when my heart was really in the game. And when I finally started making these changes for reasons other than to have a nice looking kitchen or to do like a regular spring cleaning or to get organized, which seems why I turned to simplicity before, but it would never last. But this time around, I was doing it for way more important reasons, to get my health back, to get my time back, to get my life back.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, they get into minimalism and simple living because of the surface stuff at first. Because at least I know growing up, my parents had a lot of stuff. They still have a shed filled with my grandparents' things that we haven't gotten rid of. A lot of knickknacks, a lot of things. It often wasn't cluttered. It didn't seem cluttered. Like the house was always very clean, but there was always a lot of stuff. And then I think you just kind of grow up in that status quo. But then when you have to maintain it yourself, you kind of realize, oh, wow, this is a lot of work, like a lot of cleaning, a lot of time spent finding the thing that you want to buy to fill up that wall. I just did my minimalist apartment tour because every time I have people over for the podcast, they're like, wow, like, oh my, I guess you are a minimalist, huh? But like for me, I'm like, I look around at my place and I'm like, everything's thoughtful. I don't have a lot of things on the wall. I've got one frame photo of The Rock, but that's it. Like we don't have a lot of stuff framed and put around on the wall. So I was like, oh, I want to show people kind of how I live and my life. But if I had to like fill up every wall with something, and it's just so much work, it's so much time and energy. So I think that's why people get into it. But then of course there's the benefits afterwards.
I think for any change to stick, your heart has to believe you. It has to believe that you're making these changes for more than just superficial reasons or because you think it's what other people expect you to do. I'm not saying you can't benefit from simply decluttering your countertops, but for it to be a permanent, long-lasting change, especially when we're talking about things like not bringing more things into the house, like stop shopping, that kind of thing, those are big changes for people. I mean, shopping for me used to be the way that I would relieve stress, avoid pain, really numb out in many cases. And so to make that kind of change where I don't want to go shopping anymore, that has to be inside out stuff.
Right. It's because like, what do you do with your time too? Now that you're not spending all this time focusing on the stuff in your life, that's I think often for a lot of people why they avoid simplifying and avoid really asking tough questions, because once you're there by yourself with your own thoughts, it can be a little bit overwhelming and a little bit tough to understand which direction to head. And when you're not distracting yourself with shopping and buying things, what are you doing with your life?
Yeah, exactly. And when you are caught up in that, like your stuff needs stuff. So you're busy taking care of your stuff by buying more stuff for it or for your walls or whatever it is. Like there really is always something else to buy if you're on that track. And I agree with you. I think that when we pull back and we have to stop and listen and perhaps make changes, that's really scary. And sometimes it's easier to keep doing the other things, which is why we need this bigger why or motivational point.
So it's called The Ground Up Show. I do want to talk a little bit about your story. We obviously covered it a bit in the film, and people who are familiar with your work know your story. But I'm curious about some of your working career and that transition out of it into becoming essentially a full-time creator, and a self-dependent entrepreneur. So you worked in advertising. I'm curious first, what your thoughts are on advertising and having been in the industry on this podcast. I don't do advertising. I think if I had to, like down the road, if it's like, there's no other way for me to monetize this or make money, I'm not totally against it if it's in alignment with my values. But I want to try everything I can to not do advertisements. How do you feel about it? Have you ever advertised for your business? And what's your overall view of it?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many ways to look at advertising. So I will run ads from time to time on events that I'm doing or things like that to get the word out. The type of advertising that I used to sell was for luxury brand items, things that you bring into your home, ironically enough. I spent many years Yeah, helping people sell their stuff. And before I ever left, probably 2 years before I left, I started really changing my own life and becoming just really unimpressed with the message that they were sending and the message that I was helping them send. And it made it hard for me to do my job. But it also made me realize how excited I was for the changes that I was making in my life. So I know I'm not answering the question, but I guess I'm not opposed to advertising. I would really be careful about it from the other side, because they're sending messages sometimes that aren't just about, hey, here's this event, but trying to show you why you need it and why you're not enough without it. And I think that type of advertising can be really dangerous.
It's a really tough question to answer, especially now, because advertising, it also falls onto promoted posts, which through Facebook and Instagram, like if you want to be able to reach your full audience, you have to pay for that. Is that advertising? In a way, it is. In a way, you're just reaching an audience that already wants to hear from you.
Yeah, but then so is everything that we do. It's just not paid advertising. So really, I mean, any message that we're putting out there, in a sense, is advertising, but it's not maybe promoting a specific product or telling people, if you don't have this, then you're not complete and full. So I think we have to be mindful about the message that we're sending as creators, as people who are putting things out there. I mean, I kind of wish Facebook would just put a monthly fee out there to let us reach our full audiences with the stuff that we're doing. And then you don't have to think about how your paid posts are going to be different than your regular stuff.
You're right. The promotion and the advertising, it's not straightforward anymore. It's really challenging to navigate. It's easier to just be like, oh, I'm not going to advertise. I'm not going to go into any of it. Although, like, in a lot of ways, it's very challenging. It's a really tough thing to do if you're trying to sell out an event, or if you're trying to make the launch of your book successful, if you're trying to reach your full audience. So I think you're right. I think your approach is probably the best that I've heard, is just be mindful, be conscious and aware of the message that you're putting out there. And it's hard because I feel like only you can really decide if your message is meaningful, if it's worth sharing, if it's worth paying for, and worth people's attention.
Yeah, I think we all have these little lines that we're trying to follow and not cross, and figure out what's right and wrong. And sometimes we're going to mess up when it comes to that, but we just have to be thoughtful about it. I know one thing that I am really careful about is mentioning brands of clothes, for instance. So people will often ask me if they see a picture on Instagram, where'd you get that shirt? Or where did this come from? Or where'd you get that bag? And I won't say, and not to be unhelpful, but because I know that's how I got in trouble in the first place, was that name dropping and, oh, I got this here, or you can find this perfect dress here, or this perfect whatever here. We're all in the realm of social media constantly advertising by talking about what we own, what we have, what makes our life great. Not only as creators, but as consumers, we have to be thoughtful about that.
Yeah, I think that's probably more influential than advertising in general. Like if Toyota reaches out to me through an advertisement, I know it's coming from Toyota. Like I can make certain assumptions about what they want me to do with that advertisement. But if I see my friend with like in front of their brand new Toyota car, I should get Toyota to sponsor this podcast. But then I'll probably feel a little bit more of an urge, right? The keeping up with the Joneses, like, oh, Brian's got that new car. Like, man, my car is like a clunker. I really need to get
especially
that new
if he's by the beach and he's with his cute girlfriend. Then it's this whole lifestyle thing.
Yeah, and the way that people, prepare and take photos, and I am at fault of doing this as well,
too.
Right? But like, we take so much time to make these photos look perfect and to line up the food on the plate to make sure it looks really great. So we're doing it to ourselves. And actually, that's like, we can get back to the advertising and kind of that transition, but that whole thing is hard with the media consumption. And that's something that I've been challenged myself with lately, because I'm like, I find myself always just checking my phone. How do you view like the digital clutter, and how do you organize your, like, from not seeing all these impulses and things that get us to want to buy and consume and distract us from our actual life.
Yeah, I mean, now that my mindset is so different, I'm not pulled to buy when I see things like that, but I am still distracted with the constant flow of information. And so I have to set boundaries and not look at all. I'm not very good with moderation in any form. So for me, none sometimes is better than any, especially when it comes to the digital stuff and the phone stuff. And I find that when I'm out doing stuff like this, like where we're talking in person or where I'm doing a book tour and meeting people in person, it's really challenging for me to then put a video out on Instagram or Facebook or do a Facebook Live. Like I can't keep being there, here and there. It's almost like I have to live in one place and then the other stuff kind of lags behind for a while, and I'm fine with that.
So it takes some like upfront intention. So to be like, oh, okay, well, first of all, I can like schedule these blog posts or these videos to go out, or I can say, all right, on Mondays, I'll do this, or at this time is when I'm going to put in this work and work on my social media stuff. And then that way you can be rest assured that that stuff is going to take care of itself. The time will be made for it, and you don't have to impulsively check all the time.
Right. Or I'm just not going to do it at all, and everything will be fine. No one's going to miss me if I'm off Instagram for a few days.
Yeah.
And when the time comes to like mindlessly scroll through whatever it is, I am aware that that's happening. I say, this is what I'm doing right now. And this is not work, because it used to be that I would go to put a post up on Instagram for work, and then an hour and a half later, I'd be like, am I working anymore? What's happening? So I try to keep those separate, like not post something and then scroll for an hour.
It's like a rabbit hole. I've been doing it too, because I've started to really been thoughtful more and more as I've become a creator and started to put stuff out on like a weekly basis where it's becoming my job. And then I'm like, I go to post something on Instagram, and then you see that little bubble where it's like notification, or you get like a direct message, and I'm like, let me just check that out real quick. And then an hour goes by, and you're like, what the hell just happened? I had a plan for my day, and now it's over. But it's very hard. But like, I think you're right, because sometimes I can find every excuse to be guilty because of the things that I'm doing, and like to schedule in, all right, you know what, I'm going to take this hour and I'm going to binge on YouTube and Instagram, and I'm just going to kind of go through all this stuff, maybe set a timer, and then I'll know when to stop, and then I can get back to work or get back to whatever it is I was supposed to be doing. That transition from advertising and selling these luxury products and then realizing it wasn't fulfilling, there was some overlap there when you started blogging, you started to be more with less. How did that transition start to take hold in your life?
Yeah, just to give you a quick timeline. So 2006, I got sick, diagnosed with MS, decided to change my life. Didn't know how I was going to do it, but just started making changes. 2010, by 2010, actually probably 2009, I had simplified quite a bit. I knew I wanted to leave my job, but I didn't know how I would do it. I was still pretty deep in debt and had to be bringing money in, and wasn't really sure. I knew I couldn't start a blog and leave my job, but I also knew that I could start a blog and build a business from it. So I started the blog in May 2010 and left my job 16 months later. So it was about 2 years of planning, and I had some boundaries or parameters of what had to happen before I were to give my notice. Had to be debt-free. Our family had to be debt-free. I wanted to have a certain amount of money saved so that I didn't have to work with clients that I didn't enjoy or take any jobs out of desperation, so that if I did zero business in 2 months, we'd be okay. And luckily I didn't need that buffer, but I had it. I think that's kind of like the Murphy's Law thing. Like if you have it, everything's fine.
Yeah.
And that really worked out well for us. So I quit in, I think, September 2011 and have never looked back.
It can be very stressful to try to create your own business, and to, especially when you don't know if like those checks are going to come in. You don't know if that next client or that next job is going to pay off, or the book is going to do well, or the documentary. So there's a lot of unknowns. But if you can kind of fill in some of those spaces, I think it's going to, first of all, make your life a lot less stressful, but then that's also going to lead to a higher chance of you actually succeeding and pushing forward when times are tough.
Yeah. And I mean, definitely be comfortable with uncertainty because you just don't know. But at the same time, there was so much talk when I was in my job about job security. That job wasn't any more secure than my own business. I mean, granted, I had no idea what my business was going to look like, but how do I know what my job would have turned out to be either? I mean, I could have gotten fired 3 weeks later, or who knows?
Yeah.
I just think we put a lot of weight on that job security when it doesn't really exist.
I think the best security is probably cultivating skills that are valuable. So if you're a filmmaker, learning how to create and make films all by yourself, or if you're a writer, really honing in on that craft. And when you do that, when you become indispensable, it's easier like to transition to another job if you lose your job, or to start something on your own. But so I think that there's probably some things that you can do in that, even if you're in a corporate world, to really develop those skills that are going to make it so you will never be without a job, or will never be without work coming in. You saw it as a blog, but you also saw it as a business as well. How did that take shape in terms of like how you were deciding to make money through this online venture?
Well, in the beginning, when I first started the blog, I kind of made a 3 to 5 year kind of wish list on paper. What could I do to generate income? What might that look like? What might the growth look like? And again, I really had no idea of what it would actually be, but I just thought I can write and self-publish ebooks. I can create courses. I can work one-on-one with clients, perhaps even some of the clients I was working with in the advertising world, but helping them with kind of navigate the online world. And I was pretty accurate in what I mapped out, except I was about, 3 years off. So what I thought would take 3 years took 6 years, which I guess it's fair to say that most things take twice as long as you think they will.
Yeah, I just had a photographer on the podcast, and we were talking about this, and she's got a 3-year rule where she's like, if I start anything, I just have to know going into it that it's probably going to take 3 years before it gets to the place where it's even sustainable, where it's something that you can keep doing. So that's a difficult thing and a difficult proposition for a lot of people, because I don't think most people can save up 3 years worth of expenses out at the very beginning. But that's not to say that you can't make it sustainable, or at least start to make money and start to build upon something. But like you said, you had about a year or 2 years before you actually left, where you were actually, that was the beginnings.
Yeah, I was doing both things. And for the blog, I was just writing all the time. So I was posting 3 times a week in the beginning and not monetizing aside from maybe some Amazon affiliate links or something like that. So 5 cents a month or something wonderful.
Yeah.
And that was okay because I was engaged in something that I really enjoyed. It made that job that I really couldn't stand more bearable, because I knew it was helping me get to where I needed to go.
Right. So you had an idea of the direction that you wanted to head, so you could kind of grind it out for a little bit. How difficult was that time? 3 blog posts a week is a lot. When you have a full-time job, that's even more challenging. Like, how did you find the time for it?
It was a lot. It was that plus guest posting. I mean, this was in 2010, so guest posting was the way to go. I mean, I was probably guest posting once a week on top of those 3 posts. Looking back at those 3 posts, there wasn't a whole lot of meat to them, so I would say they didn't take a whole lot of time. But overall, I had a really flexible day job, so I could write a little bit in the morning, a little bit in the afternoon, and some in the evening. But again, it was work that I really enjoyed and still do. Like, I really like writing blog posts.
What's your consistency these days?
Typically once a week.
Yeah. Is that, I guess, why do you set that intention of posting consistently? What's important about it?
A few things. I mean, the important thing for me is that the more I write, the more I write. So if I write every single day, but I post once a week. I don't mind how many times other people post, but I know for me and for my community, more than that is almost too much. So if I were to send out a blog post every day, A, I know I would get hate mail, and B, it just wouldn't, I know that there wouldn't be the same type of connection. By posting once a week, I feel like I'm saying, I value your time. I'm putting everything that I could split up into, 7 emails into this one post for the week.
Yeah. Yeah, I sometimes worry that I'm bothering people. And I think that like through Instagram or anything I'm doing, I'm just like, maybe I'm overthinking things, but I'm like, man, I feel like I posted too many videos this week, or maybe I shouldn't post this much. But I think there's probably an element of feeling it out and really seeing, like, everybody's audience is a little bit different. And as you build an audience, you can probably set an expectation. The email thing is probably, that's like a significant factor there, where you probably don't want to be emailing somebody 7 times a day. But you essentially send an email out with every blog post that you do.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm getting better at the email stuff. I just started. I'm like learning all this right now. And it's great to do this podcast because I can just pick people's brains about what's worked for them and what hasn't. But the email thing is like been the slowest for me to pick up, because it requires writing. It requires a lot of thoughtfulness and intention. And if you're going to reach out to somebody through email and go into their inbox, there's, I think, a high likelihood that they will unsubscribe if they don't like it, that they will leave. Have you noticed that? Like if you post, or maybe you send something that's not adding value to their lives, then you see kind of a backlash from it?
Well, to back up for a second, for the first 5 years that I blogged, I used FeedBurner through Google, which I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's a terrible platform for emailing people. Mm-hmm. You have no idea if anyone gets it, and the design is just bad. It's unsupported, but it's free. And so that really spoke to me in the beginning. Sure. I mean, it's always this balance of time versus money, I think, when you're starting something new. And by year 5 or year 6, I switched over to ConvertKit and started investing in that service and being able to send things that looked a lot better. But almost every email I send is simply a blog post. So there's not a lot of extra. It's exactly what's on the blog delivered to an inbox, if that's how you want to receive it. And with FeedBurner, I could never see how many people unsubscribed, and now I do, because it's just right there. It's a lot, like a lot of people.
It's every time you get people that will leave.
Oh yeah. But I've gotten to this place where I'm glad that happens, because it's expensive to
right, because like every 1,000 or every 500 subscribers you have to pay a little bit more money.
Right, and I'm happy to invest in that, but if you don't want it, get out.
Yeah.
Please, and do something or sign up for something that better speaks to you, because otherwise I know I'm just going to the junk mail or to the trash, or they're just looking at it and dismissing it. But when they unsubscribe, they're taking action and saying, this is not for me. And I'm almost happy about it.
I love that. When I started doing YouTube and stuff, and like really cared about my follower count and subscribers, and I'm just checking it every day, because it's exciting to build something, and that's one of those metrics that really helps you understand if like your audience is growing or not. And then I would get upset when I would see, like, I could see a downtick. I would upload a video and I'm like, I'm supposed to be getting more followers when I upload a video and people are leaving? But then you're right, I started to look at that as a good thing. I'm like, this is great. Like, obviously that person didn't like what I was making. They weren't connected with my message, but that's cool. Like, I'd much rather have 10 followers that were die hard than 100 that aren't even watching what I'm doing. And I think that's important. Writing so much, have you run out of ideas yet? And you're writing like a lot about simplicity, a lot about minimalism. Do you ever worry you're like, I'm just gonna run out of ideas next week, and I'm not gonna know what to write about or what to put out there?
I never worry about that, because like I said, the more I write, the more that I'm capturing my ideas, the more that follow. If I don't write for a bit, or in the beginning when I first went from 3 posts down to 2, down to 1 a week, it was harder to come up with ideas, actually. But now that I'm kind of back in that flow, once a week plus daily journaling, no, I mean, it hasn't happened yet. So that's not something that I worry about.
Yeah. When did things start to pick up? Like, what was there a moment when you're like, I can actually do this. Like, this is actually working. Was it before you left or was it after?
I knew when I left, when I gave my notice, that I could make something of what I had, but I hadn't yet. So I wasn't generating a livable income by any means when I left my full-time job. But I saw, I had sold one ebook, I think, and saw the power of that. And I started to see the power of the connection through the blog and the growth that was happening. And I knew it was possible. I still don't. I mean, I don't know what I'll be doing in 5 years, to be honest. And I like that. I like that about it, because that gives me an opportunity to be curious and to pivot a little bit as things change, as they always do, where I know that my work is not going to look exactly like it does today. But I would say probably 5 years in, things really started to take off, which sounds like a long time, but it went by in a flash.
Yeah. And you had to get started at some point. You had to get moving. I think a lot of times we just want the results right away. And I think if you told people it's going to take 5 years for your business to like really start working for you and doing well, I'm not sure how many people would be able to stick it out. So maybe it's like being naive a little bit. It might be a good thing. The fact that we're like, yeah, this is going to happen in 2 years, and then it takes 5 years, or I talked to Brian Bowen Smith, a photographer. I think it took him, I want to say 20 years. It sounds long. That sounds like a long time, but I think it was actually probably like 7 years before he got signed through an agent, 7 to 10 years, where he was just grinding it out, having jobs here and there, but not doing anything. And now he's like a top celebrity photographer. He works with pretty much like everybody you could think of. But you had to, first of all, love what you were doing, but then just keep going and be naive enough to think that it's going to work, because it probably will.
Yeah, I'm good at that. Like I said, I thought it would take 3 years to write a book, for instance, have a book traditionally published, and it took 6 or 7. But on the flip side, I also really paid attention to how I was being paid other than money. So I was being paid in time and freedom and creativity and health and better sleep, all of these things that I didn't get in the benefits package at my day job. So that made a huge difference.
When you're feeling that doubt creep in, as it always does, sometimes you have good days, and then I'm sure you have days where you're like, man, like, am I doing the right thing? Am I making the right decisions? Where do you go when you're feeling that doubt? What do you do?
Doubt, fear, all of those negative things are part of creativity for me all the time. Like, I'll write something. The other day I had a couple of new ideas for books, and before I could even really think about them, I sent them to my agent, and I said, I'm just sending you these so I don't convince myself that it's a piece of shit by the time you get back from this trip. Because that's what we do. We get a great idea or an idea, and then we talk ourselves out of it. Like, no way, no one's going to like this, or this is dumb, or whatever. So for me, it is keep the ball rolling, and B, trusting myself. And I do that through a morning routine, a daily dedicated practice of taking care of myself. And that helps me be more creative. It helps me trust my ideas. And it also helps me not be so attached to them. So if they are terrible ideas, I can let them go and get on with it. Like, there has to be bad ideas for there to be good ideas.
Yeah, that's a great point. What are the specifics of your morning routine? What does it look like? What time do you wake up?
Well, it changes by the season and if I'm traveling and things like that. But typically it starts at about 5:30 in the morning. And it's a combination, not always in the same order, but some combination of journaling and yoga, walking, sitting quietly with my hands on my heart, and just connecting to myself and remembering who I am, because I had forgotten for a really long time. So that daily practice, even though that heart practice is maybe only 5 minutes, it's enough to reconnect and to move through the day with more intention and to be more me, if that makes sense, throughout the day. It makes it easier to make decisions, makes me more aware of when to say yes and when to say no without a lot of back and forth or guilt or any of that. And it definitely helps me be more creative.
So the first thing you do when you wake up, you don't check email or Instagram? Was there ever a point when that was the case?
Sure. And sometimes when I'm traveling, that'll happen too. Like I'll wake up, because if I'm sleeping in a hotel and I wake up at a weird time because of time zone differences, I'll reach over and look at my phone as a clock. And I'm like, well, while I'm here.
Right. I think that's good, though, to know and to let people know, because I think sometimes we put too much pressure on ourselves to be these perfect people. And the truth is that life's a little complicated. When you travel, you may not be working out, or when you might not be eating well, and your morning routine might fall off a little bit. But there's kind of this ideal that you set an intention. Okay, I want to wake up at 5:30. I want to spend time to myself. I want to be able to be centered and ready to work. And I think those are things that everybody should strive for. Yeah.
And I mean, my whole thing is always consistency over intensity. So I know that if the next 2 days in LA, my morning routine is off, or I sleep late, or I don't eat as well as I normally would, because of the consistency that I have, it'll be okay. It's a little blip.
It's the small things. And that's the thing with motivational speakers even, or watching an inspiring YouTube video, is that you get this dopamine rush and you're like, I'm going to do everything. I'm going to change my life. I'm going to, build this workout routine. I'm going to do it all today. And then what happens? You lose steam and you don't keep up with those things and those intentions that you had. So yeah, I think you're right. It's consistency every day. Like you said, you write every single day. If you're doing that every day versus I'm going to write a book in a week, you're going to be more likely to output better stuff and more stuff over a long period of time.
Yeah, and that goes for anything. I mean, my daughter made a resolution for herself that she wanted to read more this year, and she made a commitment that she would read every single day, even if it was only one line or one word. And now we're into February, and she's astounded by how well that's working for her. And she said, there are some nights where I just read one line, and because I don't even want to read, but because I keep coming back to it more often than not, I go beyond that one line.
When you're creating content, one of the biggest things, and the things that I'm trying to inspire people to do, is be more thoughtful and intentional about the content they make. So to make meaningful content, to really think through what they're putting out there, because everybody's obsessed with content. It's like, you have to make consistent content. You should be making content every day. Just keep making content. But I think people aren't spending enough time about what they're actually saying. They're just trying to be heard. So what kind of things do you do? And, there's obviously a strong attraction to a lot of people to create these clickbait headlines, clickbait posts. How do you find yourself letting your message be heard, sharing your message with others, but also doing it in a tactful way, and doing it with a way that isn't clickbaity or salacious?
Yeah, I think we're all starting to see the desperation in the clickbait stuff. It's really just sad to me. It really is. And even when it feels tempting, like to craft your post or your headline or whatever in a way that you think Google might approve of, and it just doesn't connect with readers the same way as if you're genuinely trying to solve a problem or ease pain. That's my motive. When I start a blog post, I think I just want to ease a little pain today. I don't know what that's going to look like. It might be something as simple as the clean countertop, like we were talking about earlier. But the more of my story that I share, and the more of my pain, my mess that I share, and how I got out of it, the deeper the connections are with the people whose pain I'm trying to ease. And in a lot of times, it's my own pain.
What advice would you give people that are just starting out, that are, because that's the most challenging part, and I think that's probably the most tempting place to want to just yell your message out there and just get it across in any way possible, spam, send emails out to people, have all caps headlines and, these clickbait posts. What advice would you give to those people that are just at the beginning? And it is a grind in the beginning. It is tough to be heard and to actually get your message out there. What would you say?
I'd stay focused on the problem solving, on the pain easing, versus, asking people to share your stuff. doing things just to get attention, because people see through that and they're not going to sign up for your newsletter. They're not going to want to stay in touch because they see that you're trying to connect with people besides them. So really think about who you're writing for, especially if we're talking about a blog format, because those are the people that eventually you will reach, and maybe not in the beginning. I mean, I think that's the best time to really just focus on the writing, because no one's seeing it at all in the beginning. So you can really experiment and have fun with it. And eventually they will see it. So why not have your best work out there right away, knowing that it's going to get better over time, but just focus one post at a time. People have often asked me, what should I wait till I have 20 posts before I start a blog? Or what should my first post be? I was like, it doesn't matter. Yeah. It doesn't matter. No one's going to see it for a while. So just start. Yeah. And then the best advice I've ever gotten, probably when I first started, was don't stop. Just don't stop. So if you want to grow a community and have a blog that is kind of the core of your business, just keep going.
A year ago today, I started this podcast, actually.
Congrats.
Thank you. I didn't think I was going to make it. I think I did. I think I do. When I started it, it's hard though, because I've started a lot of blogs before. I've started a lot of things that I didn't finish. So I set the precedent that this wasn't going to keep going. But in the beginning, I was like, this is different. This one is different. I'm really going to make sure I can keep consistently making these podcasts. It has evolved so much over just that 1 year. The first one was like, I didn't save up 10 or 20 posts. I had a story that I wanted to tell about my first experience as a filmmaker, or one of my early experiences where I totally screwed up and forgot to hit record during a reality show. It's like a funny story that my friends enjoyed and they love to make fun of me about. So I was like, all right, I'll just throw this up there. It was like 8 to 10 minutes and I really liked it. I got like a little bit of response, but I mean, it's just family and friends. Those were the only people that were listening, and they would listen to me anyway. But then I just kept doing it, and eventually I got into a rhythm of creating and putting out one post per week. So I put out 45 episodes over the course of a year, which it's a lot of work. There's a lot of work that goes into it, but if I didn't just get started and just start putting that stuff out there, it wouldn't be as good as I think it is now, because I learned so much through each one. And it's like, I've had episodes that are bad. I've had ones where I just didn't feel sharp, and I felt like, oh man, I really screwed that one up. And then literally just pacing around my apartment thinking about that interview that I just screwed up for an hour. But then you get better and you get a little bit more confidence. And then eventually, I don't know if it ever gets totally easy. There's still a lot of hard work that goes into each episode, but I think you can enjoy it a little bit more, and you can kind of let go of your expectations, and then you can just keep creating.
For sure. And especially once you realize that no one's going to die over a typo, you can write it and let it go, And if there is a typo, go change it later. You'll be fine.
Yeah. The one thing that's tough, I've had a couple experiences where it's not a typo. I screwed up something in the intro, where I had these guys from, I don't know if you've seen the Netflix documentary Living on $1. They lived in, oh my God, am I going to screw it up again?
I haven't seen it.
It's got to be Guatemala. It's definitely Guatemala. And I said Brazil in the intro. And I was like, you idiot, Matt. You just made a fool of yourself. And then I felt bad, though, because I knew that they would have wanted me to make that change, to make sure that their audience and my audience knew where they were, because they lived on $1 a day for a month. And they ended up bringing, I think, over $1 million into this community, raising awareness through this film, which was amazing. So it's like, it matters. Being truthful and accurate, I think, is important. So I had to re-record the intro on video and then edit in the podcast, export it. Took 6 hours, re-upload it. Yeah, the video stuff takes a long, long time. But I was like, but you learn from those, and then I was like, all right, now I need to just make sure that I fact check myself and do this and that. But you're right, at the end of the day, so what? You made a mistake, you can correct it. If you can't correct it, nobody's probably watching in the beginning anyway. So
Or paying attention.
Paying attention, so it doesn't matter. I think that was the biggest thing, is when I started, I thought I was nervous about what people were going to say. And then what I came to learn was that people didn't say anything. Because in the beginning, nobody really cares what you're making, and they're not listening to you, which I think is it's like a big weight to be lifted, to know that it doesn't matter. I can say anything that I want right now, and I can learn and just start creating. Do you want to get to I have a couple segments on the show. This is a new one that I'm doing. This is audience questions. I'm starting to take audience questions on the show. So I've got a couple here. This is the first one that I've ever done. So this is a question from Lauren. If you guys want to ask your questions, what are we doing? You can send a video, but like it doesn't matter if you're using the actual video. You can just like face it down, but it's just essentially to get that audio. Send your video from your phone to hello@mattdvela.com. Ask your question, keep it under 2 minutes, and we'll get you on the show. So this is a question here from Lauren.
Hi, Matt. I'm Lauren calling from Raleigh, North Carolina. Thanks for taking our questions. So a big problem that I have always had in my life is procrastination. I will get excited about something, I'll want to start working on it, and then nothing. I will find everything else that I can do instead of this one thing. So there are things that I want to do, like write more blog posts, start running, maybe start my YouTube channel back up again, and I'll even record some videos, but then not follow up on editing and posting them and setting a schedule and putting my lighting up, and I'm just finding other excuses besides this one thing. So I'm stuck really because of procrastination. What can I do to get rid of that? Thank you. Love the podcast.
All right. That's it. First question. What do you think? I'm going to make you go first.
Procrastination. I think procrastination is often tied to fear. And if you see that connection or see if that is the connection, once you identify it, I think it's easier to move through. So for instance, I want to do more YouTube videos. What's holding her back from doing those YouTube videos? Like, what is she concerned about or afraid of? Or are there really just more interesting things that she's doing? And then saying, tomorrow we start, and it's at the top of the list. Like, make it the most important thing of the day, gets done first. I don't think there's any real secret to moving through procrastination besides taking that first step.
Yeah, I think everybody deals with it in some way or another. We find things that are easier or that distract us. I start cleaning whenever I'm supposed to really do something. I'm like, just clean up a little bit. And then 3 hours later, I didn't do what I was supposed to do. The one thing I think you hit on was make sure it is what you really want to be doing, what you actually love. And maybe YouTube videos for you, like it may actually be something that's going to help your business. It may be the right thing to do for your business. Maybe there's other things that you can be doing right now that you really love that could actually help equally. So I would say focus on that first. Like if there's going to be things down the road that you should do for your business, that you probably need to do for your business, say your accounting, you have to put together your tax documents and receipts for the year. Not fun. That's probably something you're going to procrastinate for. But you have to set the intention to actually do it. Like you said, you have to schedule it out. You just have to do it. I think the biggest thing for me is like, I read The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. That's a book I would definitely recommend. He labels it The Resistance, and it comes up in so many different shapes and different forms. And it's to kind of call it by that name. Oh, this is just the resistance. This is just me doing everything I can to distract myself from the work that needs to be done. Might be rereading that book every year. It might be making sure that you're staying on course with your priorities. I personally have a to-do list. I have a checklist, and if it's on the to-do list or if it's an email in my inbox, I have to get that thing done. That's something I have to do. And I don't know if that's practical, but if I have do you have anything like a checklist that keeps?
Yeah, and any sort of deadline really helps me, and I'm not going to do whatever the thing is until it's absolutely due. So whether that's my weekly blog post, I'm going to put one up tomorrow morning. I'm probably not going to, I'm not going to start writing it until tomorrow morning. I work at right up until the deadline for things. That's just the nature of how I create. So I recommend making deadlines for yourself. And then if you're not accountable to yourself, bring someone else in where you're accountable to them. So say, here's my list of deadlines. I'm going to let you know when I've accomplished them.
Great. Deadlines. That's a good one. I think that's A lot of people don't like deadlines because usually other people are setting them. But when you set your own deadlines, it can be freeing, and it can also push you and encourage you to move forward. I have a question here from Nate somewhere. Here it is. This is a video question. The first video question on the podcast.
Hello. Hey, Matt. My name's Nate. I'm 23 years old. I'm currently in Ohio. I just graduated college last May, and my question for you is, or your guest, what is advice for someone who went to school for business, like I just got a general business degree, and now I want to pursue a creative career, specifically video or photography, and I'm just struggling to find like the confidence and the direction because I didn't go to school for something creative. I went to school for business. So like, what is any advice you would give someone in this situation? And then to add more context, I now have a corporate job in management that pays the bills, but honestly, I hate. And I would much rather be creating something, anything, just creating content to make a living. But I still feel there's a void between the skills I have, the talents I have from business school that I can apply to my management job, and where I want to be in the creative field, and being able to use, what is now a hobby. I feel that there's a void, So any advice, any words of advice would help. Love the show, love the podcast. Thanks.
So I think this gets to the heart of what a lot of people are struggling with, and I think what a lot of people are aspiring to do is they have like a 9-to-5 job that's not necessarily fulfilling. I know a lot of people that have jobs that they do love, so it's not for them. But for the people that are like I really want to start my own thing, I want to create something. That is probably one of the most challenging things to do, and it's something that you did yourself. So what did you learn through that transition, and what advice would you give Nate?
Well, first of all, Nate, you've got something that a lot of creatives don't, which is a business background, and they are feeling that way about business the same way you're feeling about the creative part. So you will be able to use that side of it in whatever creative work you pursue. That's definitely something I learned. Even though I didn't like my job, there were so many parts of my career that became useful in this new world of creativity. And now you're just kind of bridging that gap. So create, make things, take classes, figure out what you're really interested in and what you enjoy, and then go for it. I mean, that you've got all this, he's got the foundation to start his own business. He knows the nuts and bolts of that. So now he's just trying to become better at creating. And the only way you do that is by creating.
Yeah, and specifically, I would say I'm looking at. He sent me some of his work. This is whoops, I should turn that music off. So this is his work. This is like amazing. This is a wedding video that he did. Like he's actually very talented. He's starting from a really good place because you can already tell from his work that somebody would pay for this video. And he's doing weddings, which is really good. I started out doing weddings, bar mitzvahs, local TV commercials. I did a lot of videos and stuff that wasn't necessarily glamorous, but that I enjoyed. And it helped me to learn my skills as a filmmaker. So I think he's got a great place to start here. He can start actually making money. The challenging thing is going to be making the transition. So it's like, are you going to be able to, leave your job in a month, in 6 months? Probably not. It's probably going to take a little bit longer than that. If you can live at home with your parents, it helps. That helped me. I lived at home with my parents for 2 years. But I actually brought up my original wedding video too. This is the first wedding video that I ever did, Courtney. It's really bad. There's like an ant crawling on the flower. It's like really corny. That's my mom right there. That's my aunt. But like, this is where I started out. He's leaps and bounds. He's years ahead of me at this point in terms of his quality and what he's putting out there. So I feel like at this point, it's working on that business side, using those business expertise that he learned in school and actually putting that into practice and helping himself and helping his own business get going.
Don't be afraid to charge for your work because it looks good.
Exactly. I think It's hard. I think like setting prices is a challenging thing from the beginning. I started out setting, well, like I did actually, like I don't think I might have, my aunt might have paid me for that video like $400 or something. And my early weddings, I don't think I ever did any for free, but I did them for like $400 to $600, which is like, when you average it out, the amount of time spent shooting and editing, you probably get like $6 to $8 an hour, but much better than working at a coffee shop. I get to edit a video, I get to learn, I get to film. So I don't know. I guess I would probably say like set your prices pretty low in the beginning to get a portfolio and a reel together. And you got 4 to 5 weddings together. Now you can start charging $1,000 to $2,000 plus per wedding, and you can start to kind of build it out from there. Do you have?
And I was just going to say, who knows if that's even what it leads to? I mean, you're not doing wedding videos anymore. Maybe that's not even what he wants to do, but it's a great start. And then who knows what unfolds from there? So I say, yeah, go in even while you're working at your current job.
Yeah, the weddings for me was like, I did a lot of them. I probably did like 50 weddings. I filmed 50 weddings over the years when I first started out. And it got to a point where I shot 3 weddings in one weekend, back and forth between New Jersey and Philly. And I had to do like probably 5-6 hours of driving between them. The last one was at like a Russian buffet. It was a really weird, there was like these dancers in this sequenced outfits and singing on stage. That was, and the restaurant owners were like serving me shots of vodka, which like that was like the only good part about the wedding. But I realized in that moment, I was like, oh, I'm probably doing this too much. I'm probably pushing myself to a point where I'm not actually enjoying this anymore, and I want to transition. And you'll know when that is. You'll like, your body will tell you yourself that, oh, I'm not fulfilled in this anymore. But like if he's not fulfilled in his current job, I think he'll probably be a lot happier making wedding videos and building up his own thing. And like you said, you can transition out of that. And if you stay doing the same thing your entire life, like, and you can enjoy it, I think good for you. But for me, I'm like, every couple of years, I feel like I need to challenge myself. I need to do something a little different. I need to experiment and push myself a little bit further. Otherwise, it gets a little bit stale.
Yeah, I hope everyone on the video just saw your Russian dance move.
Oh yeah, that was my Russian dance move. I'm gonna have to turn that into a GIF that I can send out.
That has to happen.
Yeah, no, that's pretty good. I should start doing like minimalist dance classes. Just maybe I won't do that at all. Let's do quick questions, and then we can wrap up this podcast. I know you got an event tonight to get to. I'm looking forward to that myself. So I got a couple questions here just to wrap things up, 4 or 5, and then that'll be the end of the podcast. What book has had the biggest impact on your life?
Probably, oh boy, I can't say the biggest, I'm not sure, but one book that has had a big impact on my life is Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way.
I have not heard of that book.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, that's a bad one. I'm sleeping. What?
That's actually where I started journaling. I mean, she recommends writing 3 pages a day, and not just if you're a writer, but any creative work that you're going into, just writing 3 pages a day. Not that you're going to publish it or even share it. I mean, I know I never want anyone to read my 3 pages a day. It's just getting the gunk out off your brain onto paper so that you're free to have the good ideas flowing.
What drives you forward? Why do you keep making stuff?
For starters, I love it. I love what I do. It really fuels me. And also the connection that I'm making with other people who are really making huge changes in their lives. I mean, that keeps me going as well. But I really like making things.
What one skill have you leveraged in a way that others haven't?
That's a hard question. I don't know if this is a skill or not, but by working in sales for so long, working on commission, not having a regular paycheck, I became very comfortable with that uncertainty of money flowing. And I feel like it's become a skill. Like it's something that I've had to work on, that I'm not, if money doesn't come in one week, I'm not nervous about it. I'm not worried. I know it's going to come in the next week or the week after that. So I feel like I can be very comfortable with the uncertainty of money, and it's just like a kind of come and go thing, especially with my own business.
Right. One thing to read, watch, or listen to before. What one thing? I always screw this up. What one thing should our audience read, watch, or listen to before they go to bed? What's so important that they should get started tonight?
Would it be weird if I said my book?
Absolutely not. You wouldn't be the first.
I mean, oh gosh, I'm trying to think of other things that are just that must read, watch. No, I don't think there is one thing that people have to do before they go to bed tonight. I think if they do something, put their hands on their heart for a minute and come back to themselves. I think that's going to be more important than taking in more information.
That's great. I love that. You just did the old switcheroo on the question. Last question. What's the best way for people to find you online? Where should we send them?
Best way is probably my website, bemorewithless.com, or Instagram at bemorewithless.
Okay, great. And I'm gonna wrap up this podcast episode with something new. I'm gonna have a reading from my favorite book, The Rock Says, The Most Electrifying Man in Sports Entertainment. Courtney, I don't know if you know, but my guest or my audience certainly does. I've got a big goal of trying to get The Rock on the podcast. I don't know if you know The Rock.
I've heard that.
Dwayne The Rock Johnson.
No, I do, and I've heard a little bit of this. Your vision for this.
Oh, you have?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So it's been a work in progress. I would say he hasn't returned my phone calls. I'm reaching out to him on a pretty consistent basis, but like he's busy, so I'm sure I'm going to hear back from him eventually. So I wanted to read just an excerpt here to close us off and give us something to think about for the coming day. I can't tell you 20 specific things I learned from all my classes I took at UM. I don't say that to belittle the quality of education there, it's just the truth. But I do remember what I learned about sacrifice and having a commitment to being the absolute best. I remember getting up at 6 a.m. to lift weights and then watch film. I remember summer workouts, running for 45 minutes in the heat and humidity at 9 a.m., and then going into the weight room and vomiting from exhaustion. There were so many things that molded my work ethic. We had a saying at Miami, and it carries over to what I'm doing now. All it takes is all you've got. I'll never forget that. It's so simple, but so true. Courtney, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. Appreciate you guys. As always, let's see. How do we wrap this one up? Do you guys stick around for this? I do. Like, I started a while ago. This was probably like maybe 7 to 10 episodes back. Just started having these outros where I riff, because I feel like most podcasts, they just do like, here's the generic outro, and then it's just like, go to blah, 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 blah. I don't know. I find that to be just repetitive, and I always just shut the podcast off at that point. Not sure if this is any better, just me sipping on coffee here. So again, obviously mentioned it a couple times already in the podcast, but if you have questions, feel free to send them in. That's hello@mattdiavella.com. Would love to hear from you. And if you like this episode, if you like this podcast in general, would love to keep hearing from you on iTunes. If you could leave a review for the Ground Up Show, super helpful. Also, I've been making a lot of short videos. I'm not sure if any of you guys have seen those who are loyal podcast listeners. I'm making these short videos, almost essays. There's, I'm doing a bunch of different types of content, but that's over at the YouTube channel. So it may be something from, hey, what does my apartment look like, to what does my minimalist wardrobe look like, to what does it mean to be content and to be satisfied and happy with what we have. So a lot of different topics I'm diving into, and it's just a different format to be able to do that. So I don't know, it's like hard because like just search Matt Diavella YouTube and then it'll pop up. Subscribe on there and then you'll see some of that content. Thanks for listening. See you guys next week.